I heard this recently, and it really resonated with me. I think it might have been on the White Coat Investor. He said, "Since I've reached financial independence, I've removed cost from all calculations. Cost does not matter to me anymore." And I thought that is a real definition of becoming financially independent that I can get behind. Two lifelong friends document and share their personal stories as they seek financial independence and to retire early. One reaches FIRE in 2020 during a global pandemic, inspiring the other to play catch up. This is Two Sides of FI.
For me, financial independence is when you have the financial means to no longer require a salary, right? Income, external income of any kind. You may choose to keep getting it, but you can cover all of your expenses and your needs, whether they're, the must-haves or like the super fun to haves. They're met by what your assets are. And so, like when I was a kid, I would definitely, that's the type of thing you hear, like living off your investments, and that's what I think about for FI or financial independence.
So it's a number, your net worth, or what?
It's accessible assets, right? So like your house is part of net worth, but I don't consider it in terms of like financial independence.
Yeah.
Because I'm probably not just going to offload my house to pay for something.
Right. Being financially independent is also for me about what I'm making every month. For the business, I have X dollars that need to come in and out, and I have, a certain amount I want to save each month. So I'm looking at the whole financial picture saying, okay, if I'm not earning this every single day, there's a problem.
Yep.
But do you have that in place? I mean, I know you're a strict budgeter, so you must have something to account for all of the buckets you need to fill, right?
I do. Yeah. I mean, put simply, I guess I would say it is, I have a budget that I established over the year before I left the workplace and, determined this is what we need. We can live on this very comfortably. We're happy. We're doing the things we can do. We can pay for emergencies. We can pay for the fun stuff, all that. And that is the amount that I withdraw or have withdrawn, and basically like a paycheck every month from my money market account, right? My Fidelity money market account. And that's an account that is set up with usually, the goal is, 8 to 10 months of expenses that are needed. And that is refilled by, selling equities as they mature or selling off, stock that makes sense to sell off. And
so once a year, you fill that once a year, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I should say, so far.
Okay.
Because I only left the workplace back in June of 2020. So the first refill is coming up.
Okay.
And right now, looking at things, it's more about selling some things that are out of balance, maybe from what are my targets perspective.
Asset allocation kind of thing.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Like I have some. I'm heavy in international, for example, versus my target, and based on performance and basis and all those things, it makes sense to sell some of that.
As I see becoming financially independent, I've always thought of that as, it's a relatively new concept to me, but I've always thought of it since you introduced it to me as a number, 25 times what I think my annual draw is going to be. So, if that's $100,000, $2.5 million, is that like, once I hit that with my liquid net worth,
right.
Or I don't know how you would define that actually. It's not because the retirement, the things that are in retirement accounts are not exactly liquid. But, in terms of looking at the assets that are dedicated to in some way living off of, once I get to that number, then I'm financially independent. But it's like actually more complex than that, isn't it? The calculation, especially if you have other sources of income coming in like I do, because I could almost in a way consider myself financially independent right now. If I have enough, assets that are generating income, and it's supporting the life that I want to live. The closer that I've kind of gotten to this, it's still a few years off technically, as I have previously projected it. Closer I've gotten, I'm like, I don't know. The day today where I was just editing videos, like I wasn't doing any of my architecture. There's nothing going on drawing wise. I was doing a little bit of sort of client and contractor firefighting, but I basically chose what I want to do. And I think that's kind of the definition of becoming financially independent, or the value of becoming financially independent.
It's one of the outcomes.
I don't have to, I can self-direct, and maybe that's the gray area that the business has really allowed to exist in my life, that I don't have to make this like really hard split. Like you made a very hard split,
I did
last year in June, and said, okay, this is it. I'm walking away. I know you hit your FI number, the number you had planned on, well before you actually left the workplace.
Yeah, about a year.
Yeah. So when you hit that number, why keep working?
Yeah. Well,
why'd you go?
First of all, I'll be honest with you. It was underwhelming when I hit the number.
Oh, really?
I think it's one of those things that it's kind of like, I don't know, graduating college or all these things. Like you spend so much energy on the buildup. You do all the hard work. Oh, you know what it's like? It's like closing on a house. Like your first house. Everybody imagines like you get the keys. There's like this whole like ceremony with balloons and crap. Of course, it's nothing like that, right?
Just work. It's like a ton of work in front of you. Yeah. It's like leaking toilets. You have to fix them now.
Yeah, I guess you can exhale a little bit when that is done and you've jumped all the hurdles. But honestly, I don't know. I thought it would be wild with lasers and crap.
But you didn't.
But why did I keep working?
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty easy.
Lasers.
Freaking sharks with lasers.
Whatever happened to those laser light shows? Like, you remember that, going to that Phil Collins laser light show?
Laser Genesis, man. We saw that in New York with the freaking Boy Scouts, right?
That was amazing. Like, I would see that again, man.
Well, number one, I think it was wholly Invisible Touch. If it wasn't, it was a lot of that album, which you and I were both listening to at the time.
Yeah.
Like the Brazilian nonstop.
Oh, yes. Oh, brilliant.
Have you revisited that song, man? It's pretty amazing. You have to go back to it.
No, but I've listened to the old Genesis, like Three Sides Live. Like,
old Genesis is fantastic.
Oh man, it's killer. Anyway, sorry, that was a sidetrack.
Yeah,
but,
no, it's all good. We're gonna do that.
You kept working.
Yeah. So I mean, keep working is honestly a couple of real simple reasons. Number one, I still had some equity to come to pass at work, and that made good sense. Number two, I was working on some projects that I wanted to see through that I enjoyed working on, and that's, I think, pretty natural as well. Now, I was planning on leaving the workplace in March of 2020, and of course, as most people will know, right about that time, some sort of the severity of impact of COVID-19 started becoming realized, and I worked in diagnostics, right, in the healthcare industry, so I became attached to a project to put out one of the first molecular diagnostics for COVID detection. In my case, I was basically project managing some aspects of things. I wasn't playing scientist anymore at this stage in my career, right? But it was a great opportunity. It felt wrong, like from a visibility perspective, given my role, to just walk away in the middle of this. So, I mean, there were a couple things pulling on me, but honestly, I didn't debate it very long. It just felt like the right thing to do, and my family was cool with it. Yeah, it would have been nice to have a few more months to prepare for the move that we were planning, right? We were still trying to find a house at that point. By the way, buying a house during pandemic, awesome. So yeah, and net, it was the right move. So on the positive side, something I didn't plan at all, but putting on my fiscal responsibility hat as money guy in the family, because no one else cares about anything like that in my house. Lori just is happy that it's managed well, but has no interest in doing it.
Interesting. Yeah.
I ended up saving additional money that we use to do the work that always happens when you buy a house, right? Yeah. We tore out nasty carpet and put in flooring, and did some painting and bought a few pieces of furniture that we needed to replace. So that was, and plus saved a little more in our vacation fund, right? So that's pretty cool outcomes. Although I'll be candid, I never felt that one more year, 6 more months kind of thing where it's like, I better, I'm going to save more because I can, and it's an easier decision than leaving my job.
See,
I was writing X's on a calendar until, for 90 days, I think, is when I started.
Yeah.
I mean, I got all the way down to like my last couple weeks before I decided, you know what, I'm going to go in and talk to my boss and say that, I'm willing to stick around if they want me to keep doing this project.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I had to start again with the calendar. And so I did it again. And I'll be honest, the second time it was harder because I had, again, back to the buildup. I'd done all that buildup, getting ready to leave. And then Yeah, but yeah.
Another
Anyway,
90 tick boxes to put on there.
dude, it was so many tick boxes,
It's funny when you were getting ready to do that, I was kind of, I mean, I didn't have check boxes on a calendar, but I was like, I don't know if you remember this, but I was like checking in with you. It was like, oh, dude, it's only 7 more days. Like, it was almost, you know, I was living vicariously through your own situation, just imagining myself at that point and almost getting way more excited than I feel like I should have, just because I could just see myself in that spot. But it sounds like it's just, I mean, there's a lot of mixed emotions because
gosh, yeah.
If you're like any normal human being, you assign a lot of your self-worth to your job. And,
Yeah.
you know, when you walk away from that, financially independent or not, or the idea of retiring is like, especially when you're young and you're in your highest earning years, people, they look at you differently. I mean, they must, right? You're lazy, or, you know, you hate your job.
There are people who might be very well meaning, but it definitely doesn't resonate well with a lot of the fire folks when they say like, oh, you guys all just hate working. Right. Like that's why you want to fire. That's why you want to fire in your like late 20s. And maybe some people really just do hate the idea of work so much of working for anybody else that they are willing to try to figure out anything they can do to, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's kind of a weird viewpoint to sort of get super judgy about that.
I mean, we're calling this two sides of FI because really we connect with the financial independence side and all the freedom that buys us way more than we do with the retire early piece.
What do you think retirement is, and is that something you're actually striving for anytime soon?
I mean, it's certainly not the end goal. It's the FI side of it, as you and I have talked, has always just been the sort of guiding light, because that allows me just hopefully more freedom to explore other things. Because I mean, right now I'm pretty programmed, as you said, to just like look for passive income earning opportunities, like ways to make more money, right? Take what I've got, scale the system, scale the income. And so I guess my fear for retirement is that operating systems like stays in place and that I'm not able to explore other things like I've seen you doing. Like, I think you were afraid to do that in the very beginning, and then you found some freedom in saying, oh, I do have time to do this, or look over here, look, I can do this, I can do that, you know, but you know, you get sucked back in by these consulting opportunities and the income earning. And I could see that for me. But retirement isn't this kind of room that I walk into and leave all the work behind, because for me, this system that I've designed today, that I'm operating in right now, and I'd say for the past maybe 2 years, has been a version of financial independence. Like, it's earning enough money to support the family. We're able to hyper accumulate. I'm able to fill my days with things that I'm interested in doing for the most part. And, you know, I can chase down these avenues that I find creatively empowering. And so ideally I would be able to continue that. But, you know, it's funny. It'd be interesting to hear you talk about this. When I say that to Laura, she kind of shudders and says, wait, so we're going to reach FIRE and you're not actually going to do the retire part? You're going to keep working? Like, you're going to go out to the studio and just keep, you know, editing photos or making new videos. And I think there are parts of what I've created here that I'd probably look to leave behind. You know, the working with clients part is rewarding in many ways, but it's also very, very challenging. And it's the part of my job that I've whittled down to be the smallest part because it is so challenging. And so when that goes away, naturally, if I'm making videos about designing homes with clients, that part has to go with it. And so I'm a little afraid about that. I'm afraid in the same way that you would be walking away from big teams of people that you're working with or projects that you're working on, you know, fighting the pandemic. Those things, I worry about what retirement looks like. And I know Laura, my wife, worries about that too. You know, and that's kind of the thing that's keeping her from really getting fully invested in this plan. And it's something we're working on. She's getting outside opinions, and because she and I, for some reason, I can rationalize it all day long and just say, hey, look, I can leave behind, the sort of working aspects of this, what fills the studio, but I'm not going to leave the creative aspects behind. They are going to stay with me the rest of my life. And that's the thing that keeps us alive and interested and engaged. And, I was trying to get her to buy into this idea of like, well, what does being successful mean to you? And for me, it's three things. It's freedom, purpose, and relationships. So freedom to work on the things that I choose to each day. Purpose, like something driving me forward, and relationships, having friends and family to share life with. And like without those three things, none of it really matters. And, for her, I think the freedom part is nice. It's a nice idea. And certainly appealing when you're dealing with a whole bunch of work crap like she's dealing with right now. But the purpose part she struggles with. Like, how have you defined retirement like that? Because I know there was a lot of purpose tied up in your job.
There was.
Yeah,
there was. Well, I mean, I guess maybe just to comment first, I think you haven't used these words before, but my read on your situation is you already have 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of into this kind of change. So it's going to be more gradual for you.
Yeah.
Like for Laura, it's more like it was for me.
Yeah.
Like leaving a career. And for me, retirement is leaving my career, leaving that career in biotech, going on, close to 25 years.
It's a formal break.
It is. And I had, I have a network of thousands of people I built up like Laura does in that space.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty broad space. It covers a lot of companies and countries. But I have a skill set, a resume, and a reputation that I'm stepping away from. And yes, like Lori says correctly, I could go back, right? I could choose to go back. I have no interest in going back at this time, but it's not like it's left behind. I tossed it off the edge of the world.
Laura feels very differently, by the way.
It's still a big step. Yeah. It's a big step. And it's also, she also didn't work in industry, and maybe she feels it more like an academic would, that there's this big chasm once you leave.
Well, yeah, because she's got a whole research program, and she's got grants and mice. And like, when you walk away from that,
that's right.
Poof, that's a pretty hard cut right there.
That's right. She could go into industry for sure.
She could,
but maybe has absolutely no interest in that. But it's not so final. But yes, the sort of grant funded research is a bit more final.
But you saw that retirement. I mean, for you, the big break was actually appealing.
Yes, it is. But, on the same note, I'll be honest, and I've read an awful lot about retirement, traditional or earlier or otherwise. The one thing that's constant in all of those tales, books, blog posts, what have you, is that the only thing certain is change. And your emotional change takes a long time to process.
Yeah.
And that's true. And I struggled with this a lot. And that's one of the reasons that I started writing is, let's document this. And it actually helped me process a lot of those emotions, the highs and the lows. I didn't necessarily anticipate that outcome, but it's true. And everyone will find that to different degrees. I think stepping away from, in the office kind of career is probably a bigger step. That's not to diminish what you'll feel and you'll go through, but you're already self-directing and you have a business and that stuff. So it's been different over time is the answer to your actual question. Incredibly liberating right out of the gate, right? It was exactly what I wanted. I was not keeping a schedule anymore. I wasn't jumping out of bed and going to the office no matter what hour it was. I wasn't commuting. There's some very physical things that went away, right? I obviously didn't miss that at all. And so the pluses came immediately. On the downside, sure, like questioning yourself, like, is that indeed the best thing for me, for the family, whatever, that not as big for me, maybe because I had spent so much time working towards this very explicit goal, right? It's not like I found myself in the difficult situation that some people do, that their retirement was chosen for them.
Yeah.
right? They were laid off and unable to get another role like that. I chose. So yes, I didn't feel that as much, but it still happens. It still bubbles up. Or, sometimes I found myself putting pressure on myself, like I wasn't scheduling myself well enough. And I talked to you about that, and you were very helpful in sort of, how to manage the time piece of it and the feelings about it. But the answer is it varies so much. And one of the things I've enjoyed is actually at like 3 month, 6 month, whatever intervals, like actually thinking what has changed since I wrote about this last time. How did I feel at 3 months versus 6 months? Yeah. Different things were bothering me earlier on. I honestly feel like a lot of the waves have subsided now, only 8 months out. I can say I have never looked back so far with any regret.
That's good.
Like I made a mistake. I've never looked back and said, yeah, maybe going back would be a good idea. Yeah. I should start looking.
Still early.
Nothing like that, but it's still early.
I struggle with not being able to tell my parents. I mean, you mentioned that you told your parents in advance of you doing this, and then you have to use certain wording.
Kind of generally.
When I told my parents I was starting a business, they were like supremely worried about me. They're like, "Ooh, really?" It wasn't like, "Hey, we're proud of you. That's great. That's awesome." They were like, "Ooh."
Well, it sounds risky, right? Yeah. It does. It sounds risky. So I get it as a parent.
Yeah. And all the time now, they kind of gingerly ask me, how's it going? Like, yeah, you still just have that one client? I'm like, yeah, that's by design.
Yeah. Like, this is what I chose.
I don't want 10 clients. They're like, don't you need another project? I'm like, maybe not, but I set this up so that it all kind of works this way, but they don't get it. And so I worry.
Well, they're not in your head.
Telling them the retirement thing is like, are you sick? Or like, what's going on? Telling other people about this in general who aren't informed or understand the ethos and the thinking that goes into it and the freedom that we're actually buying for ourselves is very difficult conversation to have. And I've had this with other friends here, and they're just like, why? Well, like, really? You're like cashing it in? I mean, just going to go sit on the beach. And I mean, I think it's pretty clear here that that's not at all what the goal of this is, but having to explain it to people, it forces you to always justify it. I felt actually like I've had to justify the business model that I have as an architect to other people, because people always oh, that's fine, man. Good for you, because you got 700,000 followers on YouTube. Sure, works for you. It's like, well, how do you think I got that, man?
Exactly.
Like they didn't just drop in my lap. I mean, and so I feel defensive of that position, and you must have had to defend it to other people.
I think I took a pretty crappy way out. It's it's not a high road. It's not a high road answer. There's a few good friends I told early on, and by early on I mean a few years before I did it. Yeah. Like I'm probably going to do this in the next few years, and they were carefully selected people, right? People who I thought would get it, who would react reasonably, and it would be interesting to talk to them about it and see where their heads were at. And I referenced it generally, the idea of wanting to do something different in a few years, to my parents. That's kind of the level at which I said it. And I kind of let that idea out earlier. And honestly, I because I found it's difficult to talk about. I have a lot of weird emotions about the topic, right? Guilt is a word that comes up.
Well, I was going to say, I feel guilty.
I feel fortunate that I have had the career I've had, that I have worked hard for, by the way, didn't get handed to me.
Totally.
A few months before, I told a few more people, and I started to kind of, field test the type of language I would use. And I learned pretty quickly that some people react poorly to this concept, especially people who are maybe a little older than me, my age or a little older. Hadn't really heard much about it. It's not something they were actively pursuing. And so I get the kind of questions you were just referencing there, like, well, so what are you going to do nothing? Like, what are you going to do? Even when I started to explain like the whole freedom to explore these ideas and whatever. And so then I just changed the way I framed it. And so now we're getting to like that last month, once everybody knew, when I started to, it was announced at work, for example.
Yeah.
Even my work announcement was worded like to start something on his own. Start a business on my own, start something small, whatever. And that's not disingenuous, because I have had ideas about things I might want to do when I leave biotech, like start a small brewery, for example, is one of the ideas I've had. And I have shared that with people. So that's not a surprising concept, but it's not like I know I'm going to do that and I know what that something is, and that is why I'm leaving the workplace. That's not true. I left the workplace to create the space and the freedom to look into things that might include that might be that. And so that seems to float pretty well with people. I mean, they're very kind. They ask questions about what it's going to be, and how can I support it? Really nice people. But honestly, when I meet like randos and they ask me what I do, I usually say I'm a consultant. Because even my doctor, who's my age, our age, he's like, what do you do for work? I'm like, well, I'm retired. He's like, oh, what? Like, wow, what did you do?
Sucker.
You invent something I know about? I'm like, no,
not yet.
I mean, yes, invented things, but no, they're not that important for. Yeah. Anyhow, it's I don't know. Look, it's a weird thing. There's literally one person at my job who I knew was on a similar path, and that I could talk to about this. And it was really cool when I discovered that they were, because I could talk freely with them. But I have a couple of friends, you being one, and another friend comes to mind, who are absolutely on the path and on a not too dissimilar timeline, like 2 to 4 years or what have you. Mm-hmm. But that's a pretty small number, right? I mean, 2 is a small number, or 3 is a small number. So I haven't exactly figured out how to talk about it. Yeah. Obviously, putting the blog out there was my first real statement to my friend group and my social media circle that, hey man, this is what it is. But I mean, it's not like I went and posted the blog on LinkedIn, right, or on my Twitter that I used to use for work. Yep. I think I probably will at some point, but maybe it's just not enough time has passed or something or maybe it's unnecessary. But it's something I still struggle is the wrong word, because I honestly don't care. But I still wonder what the best way to talk about this is, outside of having the space on, a blog or on a 30-minute video to talk through of this in a safe way, right?
I worry about my parents watching a video and learning about it. I feel like I have to
I think you do.
Have to
call them tonight.
I just let them know that what's going on. I don't know. I'm pretty sure we have friends our age who look at us even just having this conversation, and they're just like, good for you, man.
Yeah.
In fact, I've heard it.
I've heard it too. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be nice. Yeah. The must be nice thing bugs me more than anything else, because this stuff doesn't just happen.
Of course it doesn't. And by the way, reminder for everybody, 80% of millionaires are first generation.
Yeah.
You did something to make it happen.
Yeah.
Plenty of that is hard work. Some of that is luck and timing, right? But that goes for anything. But man, you gotta work to make it hapen. You make your path, you take choices. Very few of them are easy. You gotta hustle. And for sure you have hustled. You didn't stumble into a fortune. You didn't come up with an idea that got bought by a big company and you sold your interest in the company for millions of dollars. You built a cottage business in 2 different ways, and you have made that your success. So I think nobody can begrudge yours. I mean, I've had some acceleration in my net worth from equity in companies, right?
It's all steps that you've taken, though. I mean,
but they're steps.
It doesn't just happen, and that's the part that is, I think people use that as an excuse for why they're not in a similar position. Because to be honest, I have a close friend here who, I said this too, and I think it was just their reaction was just more of a jealous one.
Yes.
And I think that's where a lot of these negative emotions kind of come up. It's like, well, this person clearly wasn't planning in the same way that I was. And it's like, in some ways, the reason we're doing this is to show people that this is a possible option, that it really does work, and it's possible for almost anyone at any income level if you take the right steps and the right approach. And
I absolutely agree with that.
And I couldn't even have that conversation with this person because they just weren't even open to it. It's like, well, it must be nice, and then focus in more on the like, well, what are you going to do? Just like sit around, do nothing? Like that sounds completely boring. Like, why would anyone do that? Like that kind of reaction is just like, I don't know. And it starts to question your friendship with the person too. You're like,
well, at the end of the day, there is a lot of small thinking out there.
Yeah, true.
I mean, one of the things that I think is beneficial about supervising a lot of people at different levels in my career is that I've heard so many different perspectives on some of these questions, and I've had people who have come to me often with the idea of I'm not advancing at the pace I thought I would. I really want to get to this point. What do I need to do it? And some of them have been very talented people that just for a variety of reasons they hadn't gotten there yet. Sometimes they were just really unrealistic, like early in their career. Why am I not president of the company yet? Basically, kind of stuff. But some of those folks, you can give them all the coaching you want, and it'll seem like they're listening to it, but they will go off and follow none of it. Like they will not make their success for excuses very often, right? Sometimes bona fide reasons, right? Okay, and that's a totally different thing. But man, are there a lot of people who will not take put the time in, take the steps they need, do the hard work, take those decisions to advance, and that's okay as long as you're not miserable about it.
It's amazing.
You get weird and jealous about it, but you didn't do the things. Like, okay, well, that's different.
I went to, when I was my first job out of college, I was tasked with doing a bunch of code research for this school I was working on, and so I'd open the code book, and it was, I mean, these code books are 800 to 900 pages, and like it's not just like go to one section and you can figure out what to do. It's many steps, and so I went to this guy who was like kind of the code expert in the office, and I was like, "Hey, Vince, so I'm trying to figure this thing out, and if I want to know how to do this, how would I?" And he's like, "You'd open the code book and you do the research yourself." And he's like, and I'm walking away, and he's like, he says to his desk mate, who's like an older guy, he's like, "It's just incredible to me the lengths at which people will go to avoid having to do hard work." And that's what it was, man. It was just like, I wanted the shortcut, and I learned, I mean, it taught me a valuable lesson. I remember that to this day. Like, I don't want to be the guy who is looking for the shortcut. And I just find it easier to dig in and do the hard work. And I think that's one of the things that separates, people on this path from another path, that they're willing to do things that most other people aren't. And I find that incredibly empowering and fun to be in a club of people like that. And